Evolutionary.org presents Evolutionary Hardcore Podcast with your co-hosts, Steve from the American Underground and Mobster from the UK Iron Den. Get ready for the most hardcore and underground info in the industry. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Evolutionary.org hardcore podcast coming your way. This is number 118. This time we're going to talk about Kevin Levrone. Kevin Levrone, he's a bodybuilder, guys. One of the most consistent bodybuilders, kind of like the Phil Mickelson of bodybuilding. He never won the Mr. Olympia, but my gosh, he came so close. He was second best a couple times. We'll get into that in a little bit. So he competed 5'10", 250 pounds, and he had a 60-inch chest, 29-inch waist, and 20-inch calf. So he was a beast. And I got my pal here, Da Mobster, in the house, and he's going to kind of get into a little bit of Kevin Levrone's history. But first, let me tell you that he was born in 1964. And I'll tell you, he's still in great shape for his age. He's one of the guys who left bodybuilding, had some setbacks, and then made some comebacks. So one of the guys that, they don't quit. He's one of those guys, they don't have quit in their vocabulary. So he actually made a comeback in 2016 as an older guy, and he finished 16th place at the Mr. Olympia. And that was when he was in his early 50s. So Mr. Olympia is dominated by guys mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s, but it's unheard of to have someone in the early 50s place in the top 20 at Mr. Olympia. And as we said on our last podcast, his nickname, the Maryland Muscle Machine, and that is because he was from Baltimore.
So, yeah, I mean, he's a Hall of Fame honoree up there with Ronnie Coleman, Flex Wheeler, Sean Ray, and Dorian Yates, and all the other Mr. Olympias. But he's an Hall of Fame honoree because of his place in Arnold Classic winner. And as you say, a couple of times, very, very, very close to winning. He's one of those guys that people say he should have won at least one Mr. Olympia. And his shoulder development and frontmost muscular, the way that he did that particular pose, it made it all his own. It's one of those things where you go, how is this guy not winning? How is he not kicking ass? So yeah, for sure. You just mentioned something. I'll say that he strikes me as a guy that's going to live forever in terms of going to the gym or whatever else. Hopefully, like the rest of us, we're going to keep doing this stuff until we can't do it. And I think even with the comeback, I think now that he's tried the business with the acting, he actually had a couple of very small parts in a couple of TV shows and some films. We've all seen the photographs of him after retiring after retiring the first time. He looked like a male model. He was kind of light and 140, 150, 160 maybe. He didn't have that muscle, and it's like, did this guy ever lift or whatever else? But now, especially with the post-50 comeback that Steve just mentioned, I think he's going to be in the gym forever. He's going to just carry on training. This is where he needs to be. It's good for his reputation and good for business because he now owns a supplement company. I believe it's Kevin Levrone Signature Series, something like that, and travels the world. I think Steve's mentioned this with a couple of the other guys that we've covered. He's way more active now in these years with his social media. It does a lot more interviews than he ever did in the past, even when the stuff was first starting to become available. He's a lot more open. And in fact, I think Steve and I can probably agree on this 100%. Here's a guy that's telling you as it is, telling you as it used to be, and comes across really well. But don't you think so, Steve, in terms of how he's given across this information and everything else that we've seen recently, the last couple of years?
Of all the guys that we've done so far, I haven't seen anyone with this much of a social media following. So yes, he's very, very good at that. He's got over 1 million Instagram followers.
Yeah, and I'm going to say as much American as international. So a lot of the guys, it's a big focus maybe here in the UK, some parts of Europe. But I think Kevin's actually got a big Russian and Eastern Europe following as much as he has anywhere else. So it's probably a really, really good mix of people. And I would say he's probably putting 100,000 miles a year on his air miles, because just looking at what he's done, he seems to be all over the place. You know, be India. I just looked at interviews from Dubai, Russia for sure, Eastern Europe, going over there, doing seminars in front of 500, 600, maybe 1,000 people. So he's great for sitting down, even with the translators and working the audience. People like him. He comes across really well. So it's great for business, as I said.
Yeah. What's amazing too is he's got musical talents. He can play piano. He's very
I've got his CD that they gave away with Flex Magazine. You just mentioned it. I've actually got that upstairs. God help me. And yeah, he actually was in a band, and it's not that bad. Not number, I don't think it was ever going to be a chart thing or whatever, but he sings well, he passionately, and the band were quite good. So yeah, I think the Flex Magazine gave that away, and I've actually got, God help me, with my collection of bodybuilding paraphernalia and whatever else that I've got upstairs. I've actually got the CD that they gave away with the magazine. So yeah, for sure.
What's amazing about him, I think it has a lot to do with his upbringing. He grew up in a very rough part of the United States, in Baltimore. Baltimore is one of the more rough cities. He lost his father at a very young age to cancer. His father was Italian. His mother was African-American, and he had 5 siblings. So, that took a lot of toll on him. That's a lot of pressure. So the way he turned that negative into a positive was weight training.
Yeah.
And that kind of got him away from it. He also watched his cousin. He's big on the military. On his, if you look at his social media, he's big on the military, and a big reason for that is his family. He's got family in the military, so his family being in the military kind of motivated him, because he watched his family members go from bad areas. They got the opportunity to be in the military, to travel the world, to get into shape, to be disciplined, and that kind of got him motivated, and that kind of gave him a role model.
Yeah.
To break away from that negativity that he was surrounded by as a child. So he, he started obsessing over nutrition at a young age. He didn't want to die young, and he wanted to outdo his relatives who were in the military. So that motivated him to do it. So, right off the bat, in his early 20s, he got his professional career going. He won the NPC show. Mid-20s, 1991, he won the Grand Prix in Germany. He won the Night of Champions. And then he was predicted by many to end up being a Mr. Olympia one day. He had the genetics. He had the intelligence. He had it all. And then he got second place in 1992 to your pal, Mobster, Dorian Yates.
My pal.
So we've done Dorian Yates already, right? Previous podcast.
I think I've done the story about his wife.
Yeah. So if you guys want to check out Dorian Yates, who Kevin Levrone could not beat, you can go back and listen to the one we did on Dorian Yates. I can't even keep track of all the guys we've done so far. We've done so many.
Quick one for you, Steve. In fact, during one of the research, as usual, for all these podcasts, that Kevin talks about how everybody that was winning the Mr. Olympia at that time tended to be somewhere between 20 and, to quote him, with Ronnie, up to 60 pounds heavier. We're talking about in a couple of interviews how heavy he was on stage. And I believe he said that when Dorian won the Mr. Olympia and Kevin was trying his best to be up there in the top 2, top 3, Kevin was talking about 227. Just from the photographs that we've seen, how Kevin looks is something else compared to what he actually weighed. And at his heaviest, which was with advice from Dave Palumbo, who's 257. But most of his career is only around 230, 235, maybe 237 pounds. The height obviously helps, and we'll get into the genetics in a minute. But in terms, he looked so much bigger. So it shows you just how visual that stuff is. But then you come up against Dorian, and Dorian's like 20, 30 pounds heavier, with similar condition and 2 or 3 good poses of his own. On his own, Kevin would have probably won. But when you then put him in comparison and just got a much bigger, as muscular fella standing next to you, it's game over, unfortunately. But if Dorian hadn't competed, I'd have given Kevin a win, at least one win, for sure. Steve.
Yeah, and we're gonna kind of get into Mr. Olympia in a second, but before we do, after that Mr. Olympia, he suffered a major injury to his chest. And, chest injuries are very, very common in guys because what ends up happening is you have two options when you're bench pressing. If you're pushing that heavy weight, you can either blow out your shoulder, which I did. I didn't even know I did it. Shoulder injuries are very, very tricky. Or in his case, you blow out your pec. So he was benching supposedly 580 pounds, which I don't know if that's true. A lot of people like to embellish, but 580 pounds is a lot of weight. I mean, I've never seen someone in person bench that much weight. And I've worked out with some strong guys. I've seen guys bench like 505, 510, but 580. If something goes wrong when you're benching that much weight, you're screwed. I mean, you're screwed. You better have a good spotter there to get that bar off of your chest if something goes wrong like that, where you tear something. So, I mean, have you ever seen that?
Funny enough, I know guys that can bench more than 580, but I haven't actually seen it myself. As you say, in person. In the gym, 500 plus. Lawrence Charlet, World Strongest Man competitor, Big Loz, as he's called on YouTube now, doing 220. Myself, never got up to that level. My closest was a couple of attempts with 200 kilos, 440 pounds, but no, regularly, no. It's very, very rare. And certainly Kevin was a very strong guy for sure. And this is just from the early videos, 500-pound plus bench presses I've seen on those videos. Talks about squatting 600 pounds with Dave Palumbo when they've come up to see him one time. And I actually think, as good as his bench press was, his overhead press was probably just as good as well. I mean, on one of the same videos when he's doing the 500, seated press on a Smith machine with 400 plus pounds. So very, very strong upper body. And 600-pound squats are not to be sniffed at either. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So he had to get 3 surgeries to repair it. And then he got an infection. That was the story. But that didn't stop him. The very next year he came back and he won the 1993 Germany Grand Prix. So he was unstoppable. Now, Mr. Olympia is the one that you guys all want to hear about, because that's the big one. That's the Academy Award of bodybuilding. That's the Nobel Prize of medicine. Like, that's the number one thing. So as we mentioned, he never won it. He competed in more than a dozen of them. And after 1992, his second place showing, the very next year he was 5th. Then he was 3rd in 94. And then he again in 95 was 2nd to Dorian Yates. Then he dropped to 3rd in 96, 4th in 97, 4th in 98, 4th in 99, and then 2nd in 2000. This time Ronnie Coleman got him. And then in 2001, 3rd, 2nd in 2002, losing to Ronnie Coleman again by a little bit, by a hair, and then 6th in 2003. So my gosh, the consistency and the frustration that he must have endured, throughout this, to get so close and fall just short is phenomenal.
I'll throw in the very, very quick story that he talks about with Ronnie Coleman. In fact, it's from the Grand Prix tour, the European tour, which he's told the story multiple times, which is getting Ronnie would literally travel from show to show. When the guys were being paid by Wheeler, they'd go by plane on the tour, and Ronnie and Vicky Gates were going by train, 7 or 8 hour train journeys. And he was literally at the back of the pack the whole time. So, if there was 10 or 15 guys on the tour, Ronnie was getting 15th. And that particular tour, Kevin was getting 1st, 2nd, 3rd consistently. So he tells a story about inviting, or Ronnie asking to come to his room. And Ronnie comes to the room, and Kevin's chilled out. So he says, you should have a vodka. And I believe it was vodka and coffee. It was a trick to dry you out. So, as you know, caffeine is a diuretic and alcohol's a diuretic. So they're having shots of those little miniature bottles that you get in the minibar of vodka with a spoonful of coffee. Ronnie's not a drinker. Kevin's doing this great Ronnie Coleman accent saying, come on, have another shot, have another shot. So he has 3 shots of coffee with vodka. And then Kevin talks about going backstage the next day for the competition and going, what the fuck's happened? And Ronnie had dried the fuck out and started winning. And the combination of that and a story that Flex Wheeler also tells him, how he pretty much had a similar conversation, except this was about steroids, and getting Ronnie into shape. So these two guys together, great fans of each other, big pals, even now. And they essentially helped Ronnie Coleman win. So it was the secrets that he was doing, the things that he was doing, but as you say, the consistency. And he actually ended up bringing Ronnie up, as Flex did, and kind of pushed past him. So he's only got himself to blame for Ronnie being in front of him at the Mr. Olympia those couple of years. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I mean, after this, 2003, he took a break from it. And then 13 years later, amazingly, 2016, he came back one last time and he got 16 plays, as I mentioned at the beginning. So anyone getting in the top 20, you're top 20 in the world, that's quite remarkable that he did that. We've seen that a lot, Mobster. We've seen this a lot with some of these guys. We talked about the passion and the ability to come back after a long time off just to do it one more time is something that we can all shoot for. Even someone like me who, power lifted 5-10 years ago for 5 straight years, and I've gone away from it now. And it gives me something to shoot for in the next 5-10 years. So you don't have to give up on something forever. There's always that chance that you'll eventually come back. There's something.
You've done certain sports, and we've got guys on the forum that have run. You've got Dylan. Obviously, his particular aims are different. We've got MMA guys on the forum. So here's the thing, guys. I'm never going to be as strong as I used to be. That's just a fact of life. But if I do decide to compete, I could arguably, and it's not necessarily a thing for me because I was in the open class before, I could say, right, so I'm going to do 50 plus. And as a 50 plus lifter, I'm right up there. There are certain lifts that I'm doing right now, today, yesterday, whatever, that are good for 50 plus. So the thing of it is, I think, and on Kevin actually says he wished he'd done it 6 years earlier when he was in his mid-40s, and he would have probably kicked ass. He said if he'd probably done it 46, 47, he should have been top 5, top 6. And arguably, that's possible. We know that the Mr. Olympia guys, right now, it's just after 30, up to about 40 years of age, when they seem to have developed the muscle maturity, etc. For the rest of us, the members of the forums, for our listeners, change what you do. So it might be more reps, it might be a slightly different version of the sport, it might be CrossFit, it might be something else. Aim for that. If you can't be 1,000-pound squatter like you was when you were younger, you can certainly be a great 50 plus squatter. You can certainly go off and do CrossFit. You can certainly do other things in the gym and in athletic endeavor that's different. And in that way, you stay hungry. You are driven. You're still doing stuff. And that's what keeps you in shape. That's what keeps you fresh. And again, Kevin's a great example of a guy, as I said earlier on at the beginning. But I think he's going to train for life. I think he's going to be one of those guys that's going to inspire us for a long, long time. And that's a great thing. So, if Steve says about powerlifting, there's certainly something else that you can do. Right now, I think our thing for both of us is putting out the information. But that's not to say that we won't have something on the radar in a couple of years' time to say, listen, I want to do something different. I want to, put on a powerlifting competition, for example, show the young guys what can be still done at my age and so on and so forth. So, yeah, for sure. It keeps you hungry. It makes you want to go to the gym. It makes you want to kick ass. And that's what's going to keep you in shape, that drive, that fire.
There's actually a video, and we'll link it, with him sprinting against Mobster's buddy over there in England, Dwayne Chambers, who was a sprinter. Now, Kevin Levrone didn't beat him in the sprint, but man, he kept up with him. And if you look at the video, Kevin Levrone is like this huge, jacked bodybuilder, and Dwayne Chambers, he's ripped. He's ripped. Sprinters are ripped, but he's not the size of Kevin Levrone. So I think it would have been amazing. I would have loved to see Kevin Levrone get into football and play linebacker in the NFL at his size, 5'10", 240, 250. With that kind of speed, he would have been a freak at linebacker. So I'm curious why he didn't play football. I think he didn't have the opportunity because playing football growing up is expensive. I couldn't afford to play football. You got to buy the shoulder pads. You got to buy the helmet. I think maybe that was maybe one of the reasons he wasn't able to do it. But weight training is much cheaper. Anyone can go to a gym and weight train or go to a garage and weight train. So I think maybe that played a factor. But it would have been cool to see him play linebacker in the NFL with his genetics and size. It would have been pretty sick.
Let's talk for a minute just about his genetics here, and then we're going to get into a couple of other things. I will touch upon the fact that I suspect, as Steve addressed right at the beginning of the podcast, it was an interesting route to bodybuilding, and it could have gone where he lived, could have gone so badly, could have gone a lot worse. And the fact that he was able to turn it into something positive and become a freak of nature and the inspiration that he has is amazing. So that's a real positive part of the story right there. On his genetics, Steve and I have discussed this already. Let's be quite brutal. He agrees, and I mean, Kevin himself, he is a genetic freak. He is described by Dave Palumbo as a hyper responder. He was famous for training for 12 to 16 weeks, going to the competition, placing where he placed, and then pretty much taking 8 or 9 months off. And you would see photographs of him being like a lightweight competitor, much less muscular, more athletic, and then blowing the fuck up. And I'll tell you a quick story. Again, this is one of Dave Palumbo's stories, and he is interviewing Kevin and telling the story to the audience. He essentially says that he was approached, I believe, by a guy called Scott, who's a mutual friend of theirs. And Scott says, "Can you help Kevin get into shape once we win the competition?" And he says, this is pre-email, pre-internet, whatever. Some photographs came in the post. That's what it was like. And he says, "Who is this guy? He looks like he's never trained in his life. How the fuck am I going to get him to win this competition when he looks like he doesn't train?" And then out the blue, he gets a phone call from Kevin some weeks later. "Can you come down to Maryland?" And Dave has to drive. So again, this is not the $90 flights, etc. Drives down to Maryland and a couple of states over, and is blown the fuck away by this transformation. And this wasn't, as I said, it happened repeatedly, that he would literally take months off after a competition. You would see a magazine photograph of a in-between competition, Kevin, and you go, how the hell is he? He was not doing any training, or if he was doing some training, it was incredibly light, maybe jogging or something, and coming off everything. He was probably the first guy that was doing that. But his response to the nutrition and to performance enhancing drugs was unreal. It's like me and you. If I dropped 100 pounds and then you see me weighing 200 pounds, and then 3 months later I'm 300 pounds, it's just going to go, how the fuck is this possible? And Kevin was like that. So yeah, Dave Palumbo described him as a hyper responder. His genetics was right out there. Most guys, and Steve and I discussed this already, oh, it's not the drugs, it's not this, it's not that. No, Kevin freely admits there's a combination of response to drugs, the hyper response, and to the stimulus of training. The combination of those two things, and having arguably, and it's maybe why he looks so good now, he doesn't look his age. He doesn't look, he's born in the same year as me. He doesn't look 56. He looks 40 at best. He comes across really well. He has no health issues. And apart from that pec issue way back in the day, as I'm aware, I think the only other one he had in his run up to his return to the Mr. Olympia is he had to have some knee operations. But apart from that, I don't think he's had any other issues, and certainly none of the underlying issues that sometimes comes from the use of excessive amounts of steroids, etc., to try to become a Mr. Olympia contender. So yeah, time off, blowing up. That's it. Genetics, pure genetics. His response both to steroids and to training was unreal. Definitely one of those guys that you wouldn't believe until you saw it with your own eyes how well he would respond, Steve.
I think it's a shame he never won the Mr. Olympia to get the recognition of that. But I think it was just one of those situations where he ran into Yates and he ran into Coleman. It was just one of those things. They were the dominant forces around that time. So if he, it's just a bad break. But possibly we can consider Kevin Levrone, the best bodybuilder, most consistent bodybuilder of all time to not win the Mr. Olympia. I think that we can say that, and a lot of people would not argue that.
He was actually one of the guys at one point, although Dexter Jackson's passed both of them. I believe Kevin, and then Ronnie, and then now, and probably forevermore, was one of the guys that had the most competition wins, that competed the most, etc. So it was Kevin that had that particular title given to him. Later on, Ronnie became the most winningest, and it's only because Dexter still competes and Kevin and Ronnie do not, that Dexter's managed to surpass him in terms of the number of competitions and competition wins and consistency with placings. So he was right up there. That's as much for his physique and placing second in Olympia and the Arnold wins. It's as much for that as anything else that's put him into the Hall of Fame. Yeah.
So, guys, we're going to get into the fun stuff. I know you guys all want to know about the steroid cycle that we speculate he ran. But first, let's get into his training. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about his nutrition. Mobster is the training guru. So Mobster, kind of get into his training style, because his training style was kind of cool.
Yeah. I have to say, he owned his own gym at one point, and this is the videos are all in the internet now. Of course, back in the old days when I was man and a boy, video cassettes and later on DVDs, and there are a couple of videos out there saying now on YouTube where you can watch him training, and this is all pretty much basic stuff. And in fact, again, one of the interviews is done with Dave Palumbo. They talked about the lack of hammer machines, so we're talking about flat bench. We're talking about a seated press on a Smith machine, barefoot squatting, deadlifts, rows. Steve, in his article, which we'll link to, talks about varying the training, but it's still relatively low in terms of number of reps. I believe we're talking about 6 to 8 reps, something similar to myself, but with a lot more sets than I would do as a bodybuilder. Kevin, obviously, being a great responder to those particular things. It's a sort of one of the things which was going to touch on a little bit, but say the training again, what we would call basic. Certainly compared to now in terms of the variety of machines, even at the gym that I go to now probably has twice the amount of machines just walking around my local gym than Kevin had in his particular place. So they'll be out there with the dumbbell rows and all those kind of things. I think that what would work for us, looking at Kevin, you go, how did he get those shoulders? But like I said, the seated press on a Smith machine with 4 or 5 plates aside, not overly done on if I remember rightly, Steve, not overly done with the support, not too much with the elbow sleeves or knee wraps or whatever else. So that in fact only came later in his career when he was coming back for the Mr. Olympia, because there are training videos of him there working with guys when he's wrapping his knees and wearing a support belt and a weightlifting belt. But the early stuff, you've got him just wearing a belt. There's no knee wraps, no wrist wraps, nothing. So it's all stuff that you and I actually talk about on the forums. Not that much support in terms of the actual gear to get him through the training session. And again, we're talking about a guy that will be 180 out of season, 227, 230 on stage. So maybe he's not pounding too long and too hard on his joints, etc., and not using the support stuff. So that's where the lack of support's actually enhanced his ability to respond to training, for sure. 100% very, very strong guy, people. Absolutely strong. And all the big core lifts. And the videos that I'm thinking of is all very basic, very straightforward, and combined with the nutrition, which we'll touch on in a second, very consistent once he was back in the gym. One last thing, which just occurs to me in terms of his training and preparation for a competition, and he told this story himself as a thing in one of the magazines, was he would have the mindset of someone going into battle. And the actual story was that at one point, perhaps a little bit excessive, instead of sleeping on the bed, he was sleeping on the floor, and he had weapons, various guns. Me being a Brit, we don't have too much of that over here, but in America you might do, with the guns at the gun cabinet or whatever, pistols, and he would surround himself, he would make like a camp, have the bed set up on the floor with a duvet or whatever, folded over. And his mindset was going into battle, so he'd have these guns around him, just to get him into that, I'm going to kick ass, I'm going to take everybody on if anybody comes through the door, but using that kind of mentality in training so that he would come out, get up in the morning, get off the floor, put the guns away, and then go to the gym and kick ass. He was ready to, take anybody on and have that kind of attitude of training. So that probably helps as well. When you're coming through the door, and I've actually done this myself, with a hat on, pulled low over my face, with a hood up. Lots of guys do it now, where you've got the old hard rock, Slipknot, etc. on the headphones, and you're coming into the gym. You're not talking to no one. You're getting your fucking shit done. No one's going to disturb you. You're going to tear this place up. You're going to make shit happen. And that, plus his response to training, was probably what made him into the monster that we would see on stage, Steve.
So Kevin Levrone, his diet when he was younger, his father died of cancer. So that really has, made him really be specific about diet. And he talks about some of his diets where he excludes red meat. And then he talks about some of his diets when he's bodybuilding, when he was bodybuilding, that does include red meat, but he likes the filet mignons is the ones he likes. He likes a lot of eggs, a lot of egg whites, and fish. He talks a lot about fish. And I don't know if he's being overly, facetious when he says this, but there's some articles that I've read that says that he eats tons of fish, like 6-7 pounds a day of fish. So I'm not sure if that's probably a good idea, considering, all the mercury in wild fish and all the hormones in farm-raised fish and all the plastics in our oceans. But nevertheless, that's what he did. And also, he talks about cheat meals. He talks about avoiding cheat meals. So he eats a lot of food, but it's clean foods. He doesn't mess with cheat meals. He doesn't believe in junk food. No. So that's his kind of tactic. And another thing, he doesn't like the whole roller coaster of bulking, cutting. He likes to be consistent year round. So ironically, when he was competing at the highest level, he was consistent year in and year out. So maybe there's some merit to that. So maybe there is some merit of not roller coastering your diet up and down. So that's possibly, why he was consistent, but it makes sense to me.
I'm thinking with regards to his training and his nutrition, his genetic response, etc. It's one of the few things where, he, as you say, with consistency, was 100%. Once his mindset was, I'm going to compete, training was 100%. And fantastic response. When it came to the food, it was exactly the same again. There's none of these down days, off days, refeed days, etc., etc. There are again videos on there with, I think he had some people preparing his food. This is before meal prep. And on the video I'm thinking of the training video, he's back at his house and there's like some sort of a kind of steak going on and broccoli and whatever else. And I think, as you said, there was the videos, similar videos. Wasn't he one of the first bodybuilders to talk about, is it tilapia, that fish? I don't know, orange roughy, I think is another name for it.
Yeah, tilapia is a typically a farm-raised fish from China. It's very cheap, and you can that makes sense if he was eating a lot of tilapia because it is one of the cheaper fish. It's like $1 or $2 a pound,
I think it's one of those things where what you see now is quite often, and it makes for more entertaining videos and for educational purposes. Sometimes with Instagram, etc., the guys, oh, I'm having a refeed day. People want to know what they're having, and in fact, the consistency thing probably helps. It can be incredibly boring. It's a bit tedious, and maybe it's one of those things that's going to drive you crazy if you're a normal guy. But if you want to win the Mr. Olympia, if you want to win the Arnold Classic, you're doing what needs to be done. So the best example, and I can't think of the guy's name right now, I was watching a video the other day, and he says on his refeed days, he just eats more of the things that he's already eaten. And I suspect this is like Kevin's approach to nutrition. What works? I can eat this, I can eat this, and I can eat this, and this is going to make me blow the fuck up and make me look like a Mr. Olympia contender. So that's what I'm going to do. What happens now, well, a lot of people, kind of the nutrition thing for competition training becomes, right, I've got 16 weeks to a competition. If I have this stuff every day, it's going to drive me fucking crazy. I need to be able to go and have some donuts. I need to be able to go and have some pizza. And then they get to a competition and they wish they hadn't. This was not Kevin's approach. Kevin's approach was almost like a religious monk-like experience. Train like a monster. Sleep with my guns, and eat this stuff. But he's only doing it for 12 or 16 weeks. He's taking the rest of the year off. So when it came to competition, he was 100% on in terms of his attitude, 100% on in terms of his nutrition, and 100% on in terms of his training. He probably wasn't a real nice guy to be around if you wanted to go out and socialize or sit down and have a conversation with him. But when it came to being those competitions, Mr. Olympia and the Arnold Classic, he was doing every single thing that needed to be done, almost like a religious experience. Nothing else mattered. And it's a good example, again, for the rest of us in terms of what needs to be done. If you want to win, if you want to be the guy that picks up the first place trophy, and your genetics might not be perfect. These are the other things you can control. What you put in your mouth, you can control that 100%. You're pretty much down to you how many times you're going to get down the gym. So that's in your control. So what we learn from him says, look, consistency in nutrition and consistency in training, even if it was only for a short period of year, is what turned him into the freak that we saw on stage, Steve.
All right, guys, so we got 25 minutes left. Let's talk about his steroid use. So all this ties into his nutrition, his training. All this ties into his steroid use, because when you work out the way Kevin Levrone works out, you need to be on the sauce, to take advantage of that. When you eat, 6 pounds of fish a day, you gotta be on some HGH and some insulin and take advantage of that. So, let's talk about first what he used when he was ripping the Mr. Olympia a new ass for all those years in a row, getting second, third, fourth place. And then let's talk about what he used for his comeback. So, let's start his original cycle. Back in those days, when he was going up against Yates and Ronnie Coleman, that was the 90s. That was, if the 70s was the golden age, the 90s was was more the, whatever you want to call it, the silver age, I guess you can call it, because that was the age where bodybuilding really took off when it came to size, and size was what they wanted. So what do you run if you want size? Obviously, you need a lot of androgenic compounds. That's a big switch from the 70s to the 90s, androgenic compounds. So obviously he's running right off the bat, lots of tren.
Yeah.
We're talking a gram or more of tren. We're talking a gram or more of test. He's using, drying compounds, hardening compounds, the Winstrol, the Anavar, Proviron, maybe, and then Masteron before his shows to kind of harden up, and then the Winnie to dry you out. So those are ones he used. And then the insulin and HGH and the DMP, we have to throw that in. Those were the kings of the 90s. Even Clen, guys are messing around with Clen in the 90s a lot more than they are today. So I would imagine he could have been running 120, 140 or more of micrograms of clenbuterol every day as a stimulant. DMP, he was running a couple hundred, a few hundred milligrams of DMP a day. And then when it came to HGH, gosh, I would imagine he was running as much HGH as he could possibly get his hands on. And then you run the insulin with it. You run the insulin before your meals. You're going to eat all that fish. You're going to eat all that vegetables, all those foods, right? You need to partition that into your muscles. So I would imagine it was a heavy dose of insulin before each one of his meals. He says he was eating 6, 7, 8 meals a day, which I believe that's what these guys do to get that big. So to be able to take advantage of all that food. Now, if everyone sitting at home was to do that right now, they would just get fat. You're not going to be able to take advantage of it. But he's on so much insulin and so much HGH that he can partition all that, and it gets sucked into his muscles like a sponge. And of course, he has the genetics to be naturally lean already and be naturally more of a responder to all these PEDs. So, gosh, it was chemical warfare. It started in the 90s and it got worse and worse. And I would imagine he tried everything during the 90s. He's like, I gotta be Yates. I gotta be Yates. I gotta Yates. And it was like, damn it. Okay, Yates is gone. Now I gotta be Coleman. So he's trying everything, man. And I have no doubt that he tried some hefty dosage. Just probably for sure running at least 3-4 grams of gear a week, not including the insulin, the HGH, the DMP, the Clen, and all the other stuff in between. It's chemical warfare. What do you think, Mobster? You think?
I'm going to break it down a few things here. First off, with your test emphenate and the trenemphenate that we suggest in the article, 100%, those two things, no doubt whatsoever. In one of the things that we've just touched on very quickly is his response when we talk about bodybuilders having genetics. When we say on the forum, oh, he's got genetics, that's why. This genetic part isn't just a response to training and nutrition; it's a response to gear as well. there are guys out there, and I include myself in this particular regards. I don't take lots of gear. I take a small amount of gear, and I'm as big and as strong as whatever the fuck I am, right? So me on 1 gram or 2 grams, sometimes it's one of those I wish he was on just to see what the fuck would happen. So Kevin has 100% a good genetic response to steroid use. So let's not muck around there. That response is as important as the ability to digest food, especially as Steve said, if he's having 6 meals a day, and it's as important as response genetically to adding muscle to his frame. So let's not fuck about. There's a few other things to cover here. One of the things, funny enough, that Primo's mentioned, again, this is an interview that he's done with Dave Palumbo, and Dave Palumbo's also repeated this in his Ask Dave sections, where he says, it's talking to Kevin about what he was taking at the time, and he says, I actually think that Kevin was taking fake Primo. So I put him in touch, meaning he told somebody else, or he told him the name of a person or whatever, a different place, to get real Primo, and that's almost certainly in the cycle there because of that conversation and switching out the stuff that was not working, the stuff that was working. And of course, we actually talk about these kind of things on the forum again, where we say, guys, I'm taking this drug and nothing's happening. You go, listen, something should be happening. Whoever it was that your source was, it's not good or it's low grade, whatever, switch to these things. The growth hormone and insulin, I think we can address there 100% again. And I mentioned earlier on, in the brief period of time that he was working with Dave Palumbo, this was when Dave was just starting to talk about, we've done a previous podcast, we've talked about Milos. Both Dave Palumbo and Milos were famous in bodybuilding for being the guys that's kind of introduced growth hormone and insulin to the professional circuit, and seeing the mega guys, 240, 250, 260 on stage. And Kevin talks about how he was kind of scared. He says, you got me to 257, but I didn't want to do some of the crazy stuff. But he says it was crazy at the time, but they actually agree now, and this is obviously in more recent interviews, what was seemed to be crazy then is what everybody's doing now. So even if we argued that he wasn't using 12 IUs back in the day, he would now, if he was competing, he would be doing this cycle now. So there's no argument there whatsoever. Finally, in terms of, again, this is a 90s thing, and we've addressed this in previous podcasts with guys from around that time, including Milos. And in fact, Milos was a good example of, or should I say a bad example, because he ended up having issues. There is some rumor to suggest that perhaps on occasion, and maybe it was again towards the end of his career because of his hyper response prior to that, that he may have also played around with site injections in the same way that Flex Reed was supposed to have injected into his calves with Escalin, and Shaw Ray played the mind game with regards to saying he'd had implants, etc., etc. This is around that time when site injections, either as a steroid like Escalin, giving a temporary effect, or Synthol. You looking at Kevin's physique now, I'd probably suggest it was probably more the steroid stuff than it would have been the site injections, because he doesn't seem to have any particular lumps and bumps and strange scar tissue or anything else. But there was experimentation around that time. And I've mentioned it earlier in the podcast when I said about Flex Wheeler giving the advice to Ronnie, and Kevin giving the advice to Ronnie that made Ronnie the fantastic bodybuilder that he was. These guys were at that time sharing information and helping each other out in a great way. They're great buddies now. I've seen interviews where they sit down as a group, with Sean Ray included, and telling great stories about each other and what they've done on tour and whatever else. So, socializing. Whereas the guys now don't seem to do that. There's only one or two. So they were definitely sharing information. They were definitely working. Again, quite a few of them have worked with Chris Aceto. Quite a few of them have worked with Chad Nichols. And so the information that those guys were getting was being shared. The growth hormone stuff and insulin stuff that was Milos was doing with his athletes, the other guys were hearing about. So I said, even if we say that he wasn't doing those things, that information was there, and it was certainly on his radar to consider. I think it might have been something, as you, Stacey, that was right at the end of his career, that he was trying to do those last one or two things, especially in terms of steroids and performance enhancing drugs, just to tip him over. And again, when we talk, he says a lot of his career was 227, 230, but there were certainly times when he was 240 plus, and at his heaviest with Dave Palumbo, 257 on stage. You don't go from 227 to 257 or anywhere in between, when a lot of your time is 227, 230, without some extra stuff going in there. So even if he wasn't on his cycles all the time, there was certainly times I think he probably tried as you say, the higher amounts of growth hormone. Certainly the 1,200 milligrams of Primo, if it wasn't legit Primo, Dave Palumbo got him legit Primo, so that was certainly, we know that for a fact. And I would say it was a given the testosterone phenate and the trend was in there. And especially, this is just from the training, when the kind of training and mentality, and we've talked about some signs of mentality certain guys, including yourself, have had when you've used trend. That is a kind of like sort of let's go kick ass and at your strongest, and in terms of your own response. I think let's address that very, very quickly. Your personal experience on trend is a good example of, I think, how probably Kevin responded. So if you want to tell the audience, when you've used trend, how was your mindset? How was your attitude to the gym or whatever at that time?
Yeah, so trend, of all the main steroids, definitely more androgenic. On paper, 5 times more androgenic, 5 times more anabolic. On paper doesn't really necessarily translate to real life, but my gosh, I mean, trend is nothing like anything else. So it throws off, dopamine receptors in your head. It makes you just an animal. Like it's so powerful. You're never going to get as strong once you use trend as you would off of trend. It's just an amazing steroid. So no doubt this trend was as big a part of the 90s physiques as HGH and insulin was. It just was. And another thing that trend does, Mobster, it's like insulin. It creates a environment where your muscles become sponges to everything that you eat.
So the question then becomes, if this is you, and this is how you are on trend, what's a hyper responder like Kevin going to be like? What's the guy that's got the receptors and the ability to absorb and facilitate the use of trend and other drugs like that? Is a hyper responder. If it's a guy out there with his genetic abilities and his predisposition for muscle growth and nutritional uptake, how's this guy, if comparing yourself, who's used trend, I haven't, so I'm asking you, otherwise I'll give my own example, how's a hyper responder going to be like on trend? It's just going to be...
Yeah. And then add to that the HGH. I've never ran trend with HGH, but I think that running trend with HGH in the 90s also was a big factor, because the HGH will cause your blood sugar levels to spike and the trend will cause your blood sugar levels to come back down. If you ever notice, when you run trend, you get hypoglycemic. You need carbs before bed. You wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. You're like, oh my God, what's going on? Well, it's because trend just literally sucks everything like a sponge. So it's like you have to eat when you're on it. So it makes sense to run HGH with the trend, and on top of it, running the insulin on top of that is just, I can't imagine like what kind of results he would have gotten. But again, like a normal person sitting at home, you'll probably end up getting a stroke and you'll probably end up getting fat if you follow this type of protocol. But you really have to know what you're doing and have the genetics.
I know from various forums and even stuff via Facebook or wherever else, the old joke of up the trend. If you're struggling in training, up the trend. If you're struggling in this situation, up the trend. So it's a kind of a joke. And the reality of the situation is these guys have done cycles, sometimes a little bit too young, but they've done cycles and they want to take the next step. And someone introduces them to one of the forms of trend, let's say trend M8 in this particular example. And lo and behold, it's become like the nectar of the gods. So, they go, the only way I can do this progress, the only way I can get this strength in the gym, etc., is by using trend. We know trend is one of the few drugs where you can actually have mental issues. It gives a similar side effect if with long-term use, even at low dosage, to senile dementia, or early onset dementia in a couple of studies with older athletes. So again, this is another advantage that Kevin would have had with the short-term use, coming off everything, not training, etc., between competitions. So high use during that training, and then lots of time, 6 to 9 months of the rest of the year off, which would be great. So I don't think it's this response specifically. If the average guy that goes to the gym and it has a bit of an ability to build some muscle, and I can think of a few examples in my mind. I've seen people make these comments: 220, 230 pounds, normal height, so 5'10", 5'11". And trend's been absolutely amazing. I love this stuff. I love the gold color, etc., etc. But they're not hyper responders like Kevin. They're not hyper responders. They're not gonna blow the fuck up and come back from looking like a skinny, normal dude up to some freak that's going to win or place second at the Mr. Olympia or win an Arnold Classic or does well on the tours as Kevin does. And when you have that response, when you have that ability, and you are able to do those things, he was 100% going to be one of those guys that's going to be able to have no issues with regards to getting fat. We know what he looked like on stage. There's very few shows where he was out of shape. So his response to all the steroids is going to be amazing. His response to his training is going to be amazing. His response to nutrition is going to be amazing. And having training there, apart from maybe, as I said earlier on, the effect of his mood, the mindset of the idea at which he talks about himself having the guns around him on the floor, not even sleeping on the bed and going to battle in the gym and having a certain particular attitude. Maybe he's one of those guys that was training in the gym, especially when he owned the gym, you didn't want to talk to him. Don't talk to me, motherfucker. I'm busy. I'm fucking doing this shit. You're not even whatever. And that's probably a little bit where the aggressive mentality comes from certain users. And Tren is one of those drugs that can sometimes, for some people, turn him into that kind of situation. You're adding to that the simple fact, and any of us that have competed, whether it's a powerlifting or strongman or grip or whatever that I do, that we're vaguely serious about what we want to do, you have to have a bit of a mental shift anyway, and that's without drugs. You have to be, right, this is what I need to do. This is the asses I need to get. These are the names I need to take. That's the fucking trophy that's going to have my name in it. And that's an attitude right there. And then you put in training to the mix. So yeah, it's going to be one of those things with some guys where not just a physical response, not just the glycemia or the sweats or the train cough or whatever else, but literally how strong you feel in the gym, how you're going to go and tear that place down. You're going to pull down the pillars of the temple. No one's going to, the trophy's already got your fucking name on it and no one else is going to take that damn thing away from you. And Trent's going to facilitate to some degree that kind of response mentally, as well as the physical stuff that's out there. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the only thing I would say in terms of the suggested cycle that we talk about here is the wind stroll. Don't you think that the things that the wind stroll has the effect I would want to watch in terms of the drying out, not so much of my physique, my muscles, but the joints, the 200 milligrams a day that we suggest, that would be 1,400 milligrams a week there, Steve. So
yeah. I mean, don't you think though, these bodybuilders, they don't lift super heavy when they're close to competition? They more do lighter weights. They're trying to, kind of shape up. And so I think
guys, and maybe this is where the pec injury came in, because as you said, I agree 100%. 1,400 milligrams of Winstrol a week. If I was doing that or you were doing that, we would probably be creaking as we were walking around. Our joints would not like us. But again, Kevin's that sort of guy that can get away with this stuff. We know that he was lifting crazy heavy weights because, again, those videos that I'm referring to, he looked lean. He looked in shape. So he was, and I'm agreeing, I think he probably did use this, even if it wasn't at 1,400 milligrams a week. I would be worried. And something else we want to address very quickly with regards to steroids, Stephen, maybe that pec injury. So the reason why a lot of guys had, especially in those days, pec injuries is, and because of Kevin taking his time off, it's probably his one mistake. If you don't train, or you train moderately, and then you introduce steroids, sometimes what happens, your muscles grow quicker than the connective tissue. Now, if he's benching 500, 580 pounds on a bench press, and he spent 9 months a year not even in the gym, he's had 9 months for his connective tissue to weaken. It won't have weakened dramatically. He doesn't become like 1/10 of the strength or anything silly like that. But in terms of his response to training and nutrition and steroids, when he's gone back to the gym for those 3 months prep for a competition, the muscles are going to hyper respond way quicker than the connective tissue. And so what we used to see back in the days, guys would blow up and tear, whether it was a bicep, whether it was a shoulder, and a lot of pec tears, as I seem to recall around that time, Steve. That was that the case. We used to see a lot of guys doing heavy bench press, which again is not a thing that a lot of guys do now. A lot of heavy weights specifically. And of course, if they were doing what Kevin was doing, taking much less steroids off season or none in his particular case, and then coming back, the issue of returning to the gym and gaining that strength and muscle size so quickly makes that the connective tissue hasn't had a chance to catch up. And indeed, Dave Palumbo actually says, if you look at the guys that was beating him or started to beat him, and again, we're talking about Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie likes to lift. Ronnie's training now after how many, was it 11 operations? It's got a guy, Dave says quite correctly, will train all the time. He says that's probably the one consistency mistake that he made. He says, I kind of almost wish that you had trained more, even if it was only 6 or 8 months of the year and had 2 or 3 months off, to see what he said. I think you would have been Mr. Olympia. So it's one of those things that might be a reason why he blew his pec then. And I think the only other thing in terms of his injuries, etc., where at the time off actually probably helped a little bit, is that when he got to 50 plus and he decided he was going to become back to the Mr. Olympia, and he did look pretty good, was the knees that required an operation. And in fact, just on that particular point, and just to finish here, Steve, there wasn't this thing where the one thing that probably was stood out in people's minds was Kevin doing a pose down during a press conference, shirt off, and I can't remember, I think it was a Gunter Sleer camp, and there's the two of them with their shirts off, and amongst the other guys all sitting there with their tracksuits or their shirts and ties on or whatever suits, and standing in the middle stairs with Sean Ray and Bob Ciccirillo. And you're thinking, this guy's in his 50s, he looks pretty fucking damn good. And again, and one of the great things about his pec tear was, I don't believe he had those kind of indentations just inside his pec deltoid in anyway. So he didn't look, apart from just after the operation, like he'd had a pec tear, which was very useful. And again, that time off for the rest of the year is going to help with that particular regards. And if we were talking about performance enhancing drugs again, both the knees and the pec, I'd probably throw in some peptides now, don't you think so? To help with the recovery for the injuries and the wear and tear on the knees.
Yeah, so let's talk about when he came back. When he came back, that was 13 years later. They had learned a lot in that 13 years. I think the peptide use, no doubt.
Now, 100%.
I think guys were messing around with the GHRPs, the GHRHs. And maybe lowering their HGH to save some money, because those will give you the same results. They're much cheaper if you're able to find legit peptides. I also think, at a later age too, maybe he listened to some of those guys like Dave Palumbo. Maybe he listened to some of the other older guys and dialed back his steroid use a little bit, dialed back his training. And I think in the end, it worked out for him. I don't think that if he would have kept the same strategy, he would have made the top 20 when he came in his early 50s. So I wonder if he lowered the trend, maybe added in some Primo. Maybe because 1,200 milligrams of Primo is not that bad when it comes to side effects and symptoms. So I'm just curious if he kind of went more old school and he went back to more of an 80s cycle rather than following what he did in the 90s. What do you think?
I'll ask you a quick question, Steve, because you're more of an expert on these things than I am, despite the fact I'm the right age, but you're more of an expert in terms of the advice. Would you, if you, for example, had competed as Kevin did in his 30s, you would choose to do a different approach as a 50-year-old bodybuilder? This is the thing, as a lot of the guys on the forums take this thing where there's this idea, which is not always true, that you need to take more and more steroids in order to still get a response and still grow. And you and I have talked about this a million times. We say, listen, guys, if more and more steroids is the approach, there'll be 500-pound bodybuilders on stage. That's not how your body works. There is a limit. You don't know what those limits are until you hit the limit. So here's the thing again, right? What you're able to do when you're 20 and how your body responds when you're 20 and when you're 30 and when you're 40 years of age is not the same as when you're 50. So I think for me, this is my view, I'll see what you think, there is no need to take grams and grams of gear because you're an older bodybuilder versus how you would respond physically in terms of your muscularity, in terms of your strength. The Cycle X works really well when you're 30. But in terms of your body's ability to filter out the effects of steroids, vis-a-vis your liver and your kidneys, etc., your liver and your kidneys are 40 or 50 years old. So throwing 2 or 3 grams at it when you're 50 years of age is not going to work. It's going to really stress your body and your ability to respond healthily to grams and grams of gear. This is why you don't get guys like Boston Lloyd and others. No one is 50 years of age and saying, I'm on 5 grams a week. If they are, they're a fucking moron. So I suspect you're right. I think that Kevin would not have been on grams and grams a week, not doing the big cycles that the other guys, the younger guys that were with him at that press conference and competing with him on stage. If they're on 3.5, 4 runs, 5 grams a week, he is not, as a 50-year-old bodybuilder coming back to the Mr. Olympia stage. Now, of course, he's going to give away 20 or 30 pounds, but he was giving away 20 or 30 pounds when he was on stage with Ronnie. He was giving away 20 or 30 pounds when he was on stage with Dorian. Unfortunately, he's given away 20 or 30 pounds to 90% of the guys that he's on stage with when he comes back as a 50-plus lifter. But certainly, I don't think he would have been on a lot of gear, because your ability to deal with the stresses on your body with large amounts of steroids is that much harder when you're a 50-plus-year-old lifter. I mean, just like I said, the filtering out through the system by your liver and your kidneys. Don't you think so, Steve? It's not a good idea to be using grams and grams of gear when you're an older lifter.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, because anabolic steroids are inflammatory in the body. So, I mean, if I could go back, I never ran much steroids anyway. But if I could go back, the one thing I would do less would be training. I overtrained a lot. I was doing too many 1, 2, 3 rep lifts. I was doing too many clean and jerks and in militaries and shoulder presses and hammering away at my body a little too much. So I think that's what I would have changed. And I did the same thing when I competed as an endurance athlete. I hammered my body too much the same way. And it bit me on that too. So that's just the way I am. I do everything, overtrain everything. And that's, I think, what I would have done. I think I would have trained more efficiently. Now I know to train more efficiently. In that it's less important how much you do rather than doing it properly. I mean, just some of these compound lifts, these jerk movements and stuff, they're not good. I mean, they're not good for your spine. They're not good for your neck. They're not good for your back. So I think when you get older, you realize that the jerking motions, and you've got to just be smooth when you weight train. If you want,
we make a point on the forums of asking the guys' ages for a couple of reasons here, people, for the benefit of our listeners. We do it specifically for the younger guys that are convinced that they need to take loads of steroids, and you go, hang on, you haven't actually physically matured yet. You haven't emotionally matured yet. You shouldn't be doing a shitload of steroids when you're 20. And Christ, we just saw one in the last couple of days who's on TRT or TRT dose, and he's like 22. Sorry, guy, if you're not actually gone to the doctor or an endocrinologist and seen someone and they've said this and your testosterone levels are shit and you could be on TRT at 22, then what the fuck are you doing? So that's bitch slap number one. Bitch slap number two is what I'm saying in regards to the older lifters. So what Steve says about training is 100% true. Been there, seen there, done that, done the foolish shit. That's why we tell you these things and try to get you on the right path. Don't do some of the crazy stuff that we've done, but we understand why, and we understand, the drive and the obsessiveness and wanting to be like that. And that's the way we've done the stupid stuff. But you don't have to do the same stupid stuff as we did, and you can benefit from not having aching joints and torn up shit and whatever else when you get older. But again, what I'm really getting at here is the older guys, and I'm talking about 40 plus, typically a man physically matures and emotionally matures, for that matter, about age 35, when you start taking on responsibilities like mortgages and wives and girlfriends and kids and all the rest of that. So physically is around the same. If you train, you can probably maximize your strength at around age 40. Now, your ability to handle performance enhancing drugs changes as you get older. Your ability when you're late 20s, which is when we think you should start using steroids if you're going to use them, later the better, versus your ability when you were 50 or 50 plus, as Kevin was, is different. And so I'm saying, again, 100% here, I think Kevin would have been using half of the amount of gear of the rest of the guys that was in the Olympia lineup when he returned to the stage. Because for two reasons. First off, he knows what works. Well, three reasons. First off, he knows what works. He's a hybrid responder, which is the second reason. And finally, as I said, the ability to handle the side effects, the ability for your body to filter all this stuff out, the stress on the system, the inflammatory response that Steve responds to, is that much harder to deal with when you're 50 plus years of age. But all that said, the pose down that he did, the informal pose down that he did with Gunnar, showed a fantastic upper body, pretty fucking good for someone who's in his early 50s. And he got, I believe he got a standing ovation at the Olympia. He was able to come back, show the guys that it wasn't not to, you can't ignore me. I don't think he placed anywhere worth a mention. He came last. It was a tied for last place, 15th place. But he got a standing ovation. from the audience because they were blown away. He still looked pretty fucking good. He looked like he used to, or just under what he used to look to back in the day. Bearing in mind he hadn't been on stage for 13 years. And it's only that bodybuilding had taken another couple of steps forward. And as I said, that 90% of the guys he was on stage with were bigger than him, whereas in the old days, it was literally just the guy that was going to win the competition that was bigger. So that's where things have changed. If he'd upped the amount of steroids to try and keep up with the modern guys, I think he'd done himself more harm than good in terms of his genetic response and adding muscle and whatever else. And it probably would have ruined his physique as well, because, just putting another 10 pounds on doesn't necessarily improve how you're going to look on stage. And he proved that by how he did look on stage. He looked pretty fucking good for a guy of his age. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'd be curious to know what I would be curious to know, and that's something that we'll never know, but I'd be curious how his insulin HGH trend protocol changed from the 90s to 13 years later. That's where I want to know the switch. And I also want to know his clen change. Did he just abandon clen when he got older? I'd want to know, those things. And those are things we can speculate on. I really think that he probably went heavy on the HGH.
More so as an old.
Maybe, yeah. And then less on the insulin and maybe completely eliminated the clen. That's what I would want to know, what he actually did. So maybe we can speculate on that, guys. And you guys can definitely post on the thread on evolutionary.org and give us your thoughts of what he did. And that does it, guys. We are well over time on this one, but hope you enjoyed it. For Stevesmi and Da Mobster, we're going to do another episode next week. You want to give them a little hint about the guy we're doing next week, Mobster?
You'll have to remind me.
Huh? Okay.
Give me a hint. I forgot.
Yeah. He's well, I believe he's from either East Europe or the Middle East. I can't remember his ethnicity. William Bonac. I'll just give you the name.
Yeah. I think it's got a little bit of Black European in there. Belgian, I think.
Okay.
So yeah. But
I thought he was from Middle East. Okay.
I just think it's well, we'll know by this time next week, people. We'll have done our research. He's on the list. I just haven't looked at him properly yet.
He's it says here he's from Ghana, so I was close. So Northern Africa, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of close. We're kind of in between. So yeah, we'll check that out. William Bonac, and he's an up and coming guy. He's really made a lot of waves the last couple of years. So that'll be an interesting one to talk about. So we'll talk to you guys next week, guys. Take care.